I felt the cold metal of the coins press into my palm, a chilling weight that sealed my fate. My stepfather, Regent Valerius, didn't look at me, his eyes fixed on the hulking, cloaked figure before us. The shadows of the castle's forsaken gatehouse danced, hiding the buyer's face, but not the sheer, terrifying presence of him. He was a mountain of muscle and dark fur, his breathing a low rumble that vibrated in my bones. Valerius's voice was clipped, devoid of emotion. "The debt is settled. She is yours. Do with her as you please." He dropped my hand as if it were venomous, the coins clattering to the stone floor, a sound that echoed the shattering of my world. The beast's enormous, leather-gloved hand closed around my arm, his grip surprisingly gentle, yet inescapably firm. A guttural sound escaped his throat, a noise that was not quite a word, but held the clear meaning of possession. This was it. I was sold to a monster to pay for my stepfather's greed, my life forfeit for a bag of gold and a quiet throne. Wait, before the next revelation unfolds, if this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To ensure you don't miss unexpected claims, broken bonds, or awakenings under the moon, subscribe and stay close. Now, back to the scene. My breath hitched, a strangled sob caught in my throat. I couldn't scream. The sound was frozen, trapped behind a wall of pure, unadulterated terror. Valerius turned his back on me, his silken cape sweeping over the scattered coins as he walked away without a backward glance. He didn't just sell me, he erased me. I was Princess Alara of Eldoria, daughter of the late King Pharaon, and in one soulless transaction, I had become nothing more than property. The beast tugged my arm, a silent command to move. My feet, clad in thin slippers, refused to cooperate. They were rooted to the spot where the last vestiges of my former life had been stripped away. He didn't yank or drag me. He simply waited, his patience a more profound threat than any show of force. The air grew colder, and the silence stretched, thick with my despair and his monstrous stillness. Finally, my survival instinct, a fragile, flickering thing, kicked in. I took a hesitant step, then another, following him out of the gatehouse and into the oppressive darkness of the whispering woods. A forest swallowed us whole. The looming canopy of ancient oaks blotted out the moon, plunging us into a disorienting blackness. Yet my captor moved with an unnerving confidence, his steps sure and silent on the gnarled roots and damp earth. I stumbled constantly, my city-worn slippers catching on every obstacle. Each time I faltered, his grip on my arm would steady me before I could fall, a disconcerting act of care from a creature I presumed wanted only to devour me. He didn't speak. The only sounds were my own ragged breathing and the frantic drumming of my heart against my ribs. My mind raced, painting gruesome pictures of my impending doom. Would he lock me in a cage, chain me in a dungeon? Or was his lair a stinking, gore-splattered cave filled with the bones of his previous victims? Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent a fresh wave of panic through me. I was a lamb being led to the slaughter, and the path was getting darker and more terrifying with every step. We walked for what felt like an eternity. Hours bled into one another until my legs were numb and my mind was a hollow cavern of fear. Just as I thought I could not take another step, that I would collapse and beg him to end it, we arrived. It wasn't a cave or a dungeon. A faint light glowed ahead, emanating from the windows of a small, sturdy-looking cottage built into the side of a moss-covered hill. It was rustic, crafted from dark wood and stone, with a plume of smoke curling lazily from its chimney. It looked peaceful. The absurdity of the thought almost made me laugh. I was a prisoner, brought to the lair of a monster, and my first impression was that it looked cozy. The beast released my arm and pushed open the heavy wooden door. He gestured for me to enter, another silent command. I hesitated on the threshold, my fear warring with a desperate curiosity. The air that wafted out was warm and smelled of wood smoke, herbs, and something else, something wild and musky that was uniquely him. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. The interior was a single, large room, simply furnished but immaculately clean. A fire crackled merrily in a large stone hearth, casting a warm, flickering glow over a handcrafted wooden table, 2 chairs, and a bed piled high with thick fur blankets. Shelves lined one wall, filled not with instruments of torture, but with neatly stacked books, jars of dried herbs, and carved wooden figures of animals. It was the home of a man, not a monster. My captor followed me in, closing the door with a soft thud that sealed my fate. He finally pulled back the hood of his cloak. I braced myself for a horrific visage, for fangs and claws and demonic eyes. But the face that was revealed, while intimidating, was entirely human. He was ruggedly handsome, with a strong jawline shadowed by dark stubble, high cheekbones, and a straight nose that had clearly been broken at least once. His hair was the color of midnight, long and untamed, and his eyes were a startling, luminous gold, burning with an intelligence that was far more terrifying than any mindless brutality I had imagined. They held an ancient sadness, a weariness that seemed at odds with the raw power emanating from him. He was a man, a very large, very imposing man, but a man nonetheless. The relief that washed over me was so potent it made my knees weak, but it was quickly replaced by a new kind of fear, the fear of the unknown. Who was this man? Why did he live like a hermit in the heart of the most dangerous woods in the kingdom? And why had he bought me? He watched me, his golden eyes tracking my every movement as I took in the room. He shed his heavy cloak, revealing a physique that was all lean, hard muscle, honed by a life of hardship. He wore simple leather breeches and a linen tunic, practical clothes for a life in the wilderness. He moved to the hearth and added a log to the fire, his movements economical and precise. He still hadn't spoken a single word to me. The silence was a weapon, disarming me, making me feel small and insignificant. Who are you? I finally whispered, my voice hoarse. He turned his head, his golden gaze pinning me to the spot. His voice, when it came, was a low, gravelly rumble, deeper and rougher than any I had ever heard. I am your master now. That is all you need to know. The words were a slap in the face, a stark reminder of my situation. He may have a human face, but his intentions were still a mystery. Master. The word dripped with possession, with a threat of absolute control. I straightened my back, a flicker of my old defiance returning. I was a princess, and I would not be so easily broken. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, a cold, humorless thing. Names do not matter here. You have a purpose. Fulfill it, and you will be treated well. Defy me, and you will learn to regret it. He pointed to a bucket of water and a pile of unwashed vegetables near the hearth. You will prepare the evening meal. I will return at moonrise. And with that, he turned and left, the door closing behind him with that same soft, final thud. I was alone. Alone in a cottage in the middle of nowhere with a man who had bought me like livestock. I stared at the vegetables, then at the closed door. He had given me a choice: obey and be a well-treated slave, or defy him and face the consequences. But there was a third option, wasn't there? Escape. The forest was dangerous, full of wolves and worse, but surely it was better than this. Better than being the property of a silent, golden-eyed stranger. I looked around the small cottage, my heart pounding. It was a prison, no matter how cozy it appeared. I had to get out. I had to run. But where would I go? Valerius would never take me back. He wanted me gone. The woods were my only option, a terrifying, unknown wilderness. It was a desperate gamble. Stay with the monster I knew or flee into the embrace of the monsters I didn't. The dilemma settled upon me, a weight as heavy and cold as the coins that had sealed my fate. My life was no longer my own, and my next choice could very well be my last. For a long time, I just stood there, paralyzed by indecision. The fire crackled, oblivious to my turmoil. The scent of pine and damp earth seeped through the cracks in the walls, a reminder of the vast, untamed wilderness just outside. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to put as much distance as possible between myself and the man who called himself my master. But common sense, a small, rational voice in the chaos of my mind, held me back. I was in the heart of the Whispering Woods, a place even the royal guards avoided. I had no food, no water, no weapon. I wouldn't last a night. My best chance, my only chance, was to play along, to be the obedient servant he expected me to be, at least for now. I would watch, I would learn, and when the opportunity presented itself, I would be ready. With a heavy sigh, I knelt by the hearth and began to wash the vegetables. My hands, accustomed to embroidery and a life of leisure, were clumsy and slow. I scrubbed the dirt from the potatoes and carrots, my thoughts churning. Who was he? He was clearly more than just a hermit. There was an aura of power about him, an ancient, primal energy that was both frightening and compelling. And those eyes, those golden eyes seemed to look right through me, to see the fear and the defiance warring within me. As I worked, my gaze fell upon the bookshelf. It was a strange collection for a man of the woods. There were tomes on herbalism and agriculture, but there were also books on history, strategy, and poetry. One leather-bound volume, larger than the rest, caught my eye. Its spine was worn, its title faded, but I could just make out the royal crest of Eldoria. My curiosity got the better of me. Wiping my hands on my simple dress, I walked over to the shelf and pulled out the book. It was a history of the kingdom, an old one, detailing the founding of the royal line. I opened it carefully, the pages brittle with age. Tucked inside was a folded piece of parchment. It was a map, hand-drawn with remarkable detail. It showed the entire kingdom, but it was the markings in the Whispering Woods that drew my attention. A network of hidden paths was meticulously charted, along with symbols I didn't recognize. In the very center of the forest, right where I presumed the cottage was located, was a drawing of a great, snarling wolf's head. My blood ran cold. Was he a worshiper of some dark, forgotten god, or was it something else entirely? Before I could study the map further, the cottage door swung open. He was back, earlier than he had said. His golden eyes immediately locked on the book in my hands. He moved with a swift, predatory grace, crossing the room in 3 long strides. He snatched the book from my grasp, his fingers brushing mine. A jolt, like lightning, shot up my arm. It wasn't painful, but it was powerful, a surge of raw energy that left me breathless. He slammed the book shut and shoved it back onto the shelf, his back to me. His shoulders were tense, his whole body radiating a dangerous anger. "Do not touch what is not yours," he growled, his voice a low threat. I was just curious," I stammered, taking a step back. He spun around, his face a mask of fury. "Curiosity killed the cat. His eyes blazed, the gold seeming to burn brighter. Remember your place. You are here to serve, not to pry. He stalked towards me, and I braced myself for a blow. But instead of hitting me, he stopped just inches away, his towering form blocking out the light from the fire. He leaned in close, his scent filling my senses, wild, earthy, and undeniably masculine. "I could kill you with a single blow," he whispered, his voice dangerously soft. "I could snap your neck and leave your body for the wolves. Do not for 1 second forget that." He held my gaze for a long, terrifying moment, then straightened up and turned away, dismissing me as if I were a naughty child. He sat at the table, gesturing to the pot of water and vegetables. "The meal, girl, now." Shaken, I scurried back to the hearth, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold the knife. I had seen the beast behind the man's face, the raw, untamed violence he kept leashed just beneath the surface. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that he was capable of carrying out his threat. I had to be careful, very, very careful. I finished preparing the simple stew, my mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. The man, my master, sat at the table, sharpening a large hunting knife, the rhythmic scrape of steel on stone grating on my already frayed nerves. When the stew was ready, I ladled it into 2 wooden bowls and brought them to the table. I set one in front of him and was about to retreat to the hearth to eat on the floor, as a servant would. "Sit," he commanded, not looking up from his knife. I hesitated, then slid into the chair opposite him. We ate in silence. The stew was bland, but I was so hungry I barely noticed. I risked a glance at him. He ate with a focused intensity, his movements efficient. He was a creature of purpose, of survival. There was no softness in him, no hint of compassion. After we finished, he gestured for me to clear the bowls. As I took his, our fingers brushed again. That same jolt of energy shot through me, stronger this time. I gasped, dropping the bowl. It clattered on the wooden floor, but thankfully didn't break. He looked up, his golden eyes narrowed. He had felt it too. I could see the flicker of surprise on his face before it was replaced by his usual stony mask. "Clumsy," he muttered, but there was a new note in his voice, a hint of something I couldn't decipher. I quickly cleaned up the mess, my heart pounding. What was that connection, that strange energy that passed between us? It felt ancient, primal, and it scared me more than his threats. Later, as I lay on a small pallet of blankets he had set out for me near the fire, I couldn't sleep. The man, who I had started to think of as Kyle, after a name I'd seen inscribed on one of the wooden carvings, lay on the large bed, his back to me. His breathing was deep and even, but I didn't believe for a second that he was truly asleep. He was like a wolf, always alert, always aware. I thought about the map, the wolf's head, the strange energy between us. Nothing made sense. My life in the castle, with its rigid rules and political machinations, seemed a world away. Here, in this wild, untamed place, the rules were different. They were older, more dangerous. And I was trapped in the middle of them, a pawn in a game I didn't understand. Days turned into a week. A routine, as strange as it was, began to form. I would cook, clean, and tend to the small garden outside the cottage. Kyle would disappear for long hours, sometimes the entire day, returning with game for our meals or fresh herbs. He rarely spoke, and when he did, it was to issue a command or a criticism. He was a harsh master, demanding and unforgiving. Yet he was not cruel. I was always fed, I had a warm place to sleep, and despite his threats, he never laid a hand on me in anger. The strange energy between us remained, a constant, humming undercurrent. Every accidental touch was a jolt, a spark in the tense silence of our shared existence. I started to notice things about him. The way his eyes would soften when he watched a deer at the edge of the clearing. The incredible gentleness with which he treated a wounded bird he found, splinting its wing with delicate precision. There was a duality to him that was baffling. He was a brutal warrior and a gentle healer, a cold master and a silent protector. One afternoon, I decided to test the boundaries of my prison. KL was gone, and I knew he wouldn't be back until dusk. My chance to escape had been a fleeting thought, but now a different kind of curiosity propelled me. I wanted to understand his world. I followed a barely there path leading away from the cottage, deeper into the woods. The forest was alive, humming with an energy I had never felt before. It wasn't just the sounds of birds and insects. It was something more, a palpable life force that seemed to flow from the ancient trees and the rich, dark earth. I felt a strange sense of peace, of belonging, that I had never experienced within the cold stone walls of the castle. I walked for what felt like miles, my senses overwhelmed. The air was cleaner, the colors more vibrant. It was as if the forest was welcoming me. My reverie was broken by a low growl. I froze, my heart leaping into my throat. Not 20 feet away, a pair of timber wolves had emerged from the undergrowth. They were huge, their yellow eyes fixed on me, their lips curled back to reveal rows of sharp white teeth. They began to circle me, their movements fluid and predatory. I was going to die. My foolishness had led me to my death. I backed away slowly, my legs trembling. There was nowhere to run. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable. But the attack never came. Instead, I heard a different sound, a deep, commanding roar that shook the very ground beneath my feet. My eyes flew open. Kale was there. He had come from nowhere, appearing as if from the shadows themselves. He stood between me and the wolves, his body radiating a terrifying, untamed power. He wasn't just angry, he was utterly furious. But his fury wasn't directed at me. It was aimed at the wolves. He let out another guttural snarl, and this time it didn't sound entirely human. The wolves, alpha predators of the forest, whimpered and flattened themselves to the ground in submission before turning and fleeing into the trees. Kale stood there for a moment, his chest heaving, his body vibrating with leftover adrenaline. Then he turned to me. The fury in his golden eyes was now squarely focused on my disobedience. He grabbed my arm, his grip like iron. "What were you doing?" he snarled, his voice a raw, angry thing. "Were you trying to get yourself killed?" He began to drag me back towards the cottage, his long strides forcing me into a clumsy run. "I was just exploring," I cried, stumbling to keep up. "You were being a fool," he roared. "This forest is not a park for you to wander through. There are dangers here you cannot possibly imagine." We burst into the clearing. He didn't let go of me. He dragged me into the cottage and threw me onto the floor. I landed hard, the air knocked from my lungs. I looked up at him, my fear mixed with a new burning anger. He stood over me, his face a thunderous mask, his eyes blazing. For the first time, I wasn't just afraid, I was angry. Angry at him, at Valerius, at my pathetic, helpless situation. "You can't just keep me locked up in here," I yelled, scrambling to my feet. "I have a right to know what's going on. Why did you buy me? What do you want from me?" "You have no rights," he bellowed, his voice echoing in the small space. You have the right to do as I say. That is all." "No!" I screamed, my voice raw with desperation. "I am not your property. I am a princess." He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "A princess of a dying kingdom. A princess sold for a handful of coins. You are nothing." His words were cruel, designed to hurt, and they hit their mark. Tears of frustration and despair welled in my eyes. I launched myself at him, my fists beating uselessly against his broad chest. "I hate you! I hate you!" He let me flail against him for a moment, his body as unmoving as an ancient oak. Then his arms came around me, pulling me into a hard, unyielding embrace. He held me tight against him, my face pressed into his chest. I could feel the powerful, steady beat of his heart. I struggled for a moment, then, my anger spent, I sagged against him, my sobs shaking my entire body. He just held me, one hand moving to the back of my head, his fingers tangling in my hair. It wasn't a comforting embrace. It was the hold of a captor, a reminder of his strength and my powerlessness. But as he held me, I felt that strange energy again, flowing from him into me. It wasn't a jolt this time. It was a slow, warm current, a feeling of connection that was both terrifying and deeply, inexplicably calming. He was a monster. He was my master. But in that moment, as he held me while I cried, I felt a flicker of something else. Something that felt dangerously like protection. He pushed me away after a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Do not wander off again," he said, his voice back to its usual gravelly tone. He turned away, busying himself with the fire, his broad back a wall between us once more. I retreated to my pallet, my body and emotions completely drained. I had defied him and survived. I had seen a new side of his power, a primal authority that commanded even the wolves. And I had felt a connection to him that defied all logic. My questions still remained, more pressing than ever, but one thing had become clear. My escape wouldn't be a simple matter of running away. My fate was tied to this strange, dangerous man, and I was beginning to suspect that my survival depended on unraveling the secrets he guarded so fiercely. The incident with the wolves marked a subtle shift in our dynamic. Kale became more watchful, his golden eyes following me constantly, a silent weight I felt even when my back was turned. He no longer left me alone for entire days. He would take me with him on his excursions into the forest, not speaking, but forcing me to keep pace as he checked traps or gathered plants. It was exhausting work. He taught me to identify edible mushrooms, to find north by the moss on the trees, to move silently through the undergrowth. They were lessons in survival, and though he was a harsh teacher, I was a quick study. I learned to read the forest, to understand its rhythms and its dangers, and in doing so, I began to see Kale differently. He wasn't just living in the forest, he was a part of it. He moved through it with a grace that was almost supernatural, his senses preternaturally sharp. He could hear a twig snap from 100 paces, smell rain on the wind long before the clouds gathered. He was more animal than man, a creature of instinct and raw power. One evening, he returned from a hunt with a deep gash on his forearm. It was bleeding profusely, and he was pale beneath his rugged tan. "Get the healing herbs," he grunted, slumping into a chair, "the green jar on the top shelf." I flew to the shelf, my hands shaking as I retrieved the jar of pungent dried leaves. I had seen him use them on animals, but never on himself. I mixed the herbs with hot water to make a poultice, my heart pounding with a strange, unfamiliar anxiety. I was worried about him. The thought was as shocking as it was undeniable. This man, my captor, my master, I didn't want him to be hurt. I knelt before him and gently took his arm. He flinched at my touch, but didn't pull away. The gash was deep, clean through the muscle. It must have been from a boar's tusk. "This will sting," I whispered, my voice barely audible. I applied the poultice to the wound. He hissed in pain, his whole body going rigid, but he didn't make another sound. I carefully wrapped his arm with clean linen strips, my fingers working with a deftness that surprised me. My mother, the late queen, had insisted I learn the healing arts, a skill I had once resented but was now profoundly grateful for. When I was done, I looked up at him. His golden eyes were fixed on me, his expression intense. The air between us was thick with unspoken things. "Thank you," he said, his voice a low rumble. It was the first time he had ever shown me a hint of gratitude. I simply nodded, unable to speak, and retreated to my side of the room. But the spell was broken. A line had been crossed. I had tended to his wound, and in that act of care, our roles as master and servant had blurred. He was vulnerable, and I was the one who had helped him. The next day, he began to talk to me, not in commands or criticisms, but in quiet explanations. He pointed out the constellations in the night sky, naming them with an ancient nomenclature I had never heard before. He told me the stories of the forest, the legends of the spirits that lived in the trees and the river. He spoke of the balance of nature, of the delicate dance of life and death. His voice, usually so rough, took on a softer, more reverent tone when he spoke of his world. I listened, enthralled. I was learning about him, about the man behind the monstrous facade. I learned that his name was indeed Kael, and that he was the last of his kind, though he would not tell me what that kind was. He spoke of a great betrayal, a time when his people were hunted and slaughtered by those they had sworn to protect. A deep, abiding sorrow colored his words, a loneliness so profound it felt like a physical presence in the room. My heart ached for him. I saw the weight of his past in the lines on his face, in the haunted depths of his golden eyes. He was a king without a kingdom, a guardian with nothing left to guard but a dying forest. My own losses, which had once seemed so monumental, felt small in comparison to his. I found myself wanting to comfort him, to ease the burden of his solitude. One evening, as a cold rain lashed against the cottage, I dared to ask the question that had been burning in my mind for weeks. "Kael, why did you buy me?" He was silent for a long time, staring into the flames of the fire. I thought he wasn't going to answer, but then he spoke, his voice low and heavy. "Your stepfather is a poison," he said, his words laced with a cold fury. "He is bleeding the kingdom dry. He raises taxes to fund his own excesses. He sells off ancient lands to foreign powers, and he neglects the needs of his people. Eldoria is dying, and he is the disease." I was stunned. I knew Valerius was greedy and cruel, but I had been sheltered from the true extent of his mismanagement. "How do you know this?" "I see it," he said, his gaze distant. "I feel it. The forest is connected to the heart of the kingdom. As the kingdom weakens, so does the forest. The trees sicken, the animals flee, the rivers run thin. Your stepfather is breaking a pact that is older than the castle itself." He turned to look at me, his golden eyes boring into mine. "What pact?" He hesitated, then seemed to come to a decision. He stood up and retrieved the old history book from the shelf, the one with the royal crest. He opened it to a page I had overlooked. It was an illustration of the first king of Eldoria standing beside a massive silver wolf. The king had his hand on the wolf's head in a gesture of alliance. Your line, the line of Theron, was bound to my people from the very beginning, Kale explained, his voice a low whisper. We are the guardians of this land, the protectors of the balance. We are shifters. And the great wolf you see there, he was my ancestor. The word hung in the air between us. Shifters. Beings of myth and legend, creatures that could walk as men or run as wolves. I stared at him, my mind struggling to comprehend. His golden eyes, his preternatural strength and senses, his command over the wolves, it all made a terrible, wondrous sense. He wasn't just a man who was part of the forest. He was the forest. He was the beast from the fairy tales, the monster from the legends, and he was standing right in front of me. You're a werewolf? I stammered, the word tasting foreign and absurd on my tongue. A flicker of pain crossed his face. That is a vulgar term. My people are the Lykai. We do not turn with the moon. We are born of two natures, man and wolf, always in balance. Or we were. He looked away, his jaw tight. I am all that is left. He then turned back to me, his expression grim. Valerius knows what I am. He fears me. He has spent years trying to hunt me down, to destroy the last vestige of the old ways. He sold you to me as a trap. He hoped I would kill you, proving to any who still believe in the old pact that I am nothing but a mindless monster. Or, failing that, he knew your presence here would draw me out, make me vulnerable. My world tilted on its axis. I was not a payment. I was bait, a pawn in a deadly game between my cruel stepfather and the ancient guardian of the kingdom. But why didn't you kill me? I whispered, my voice trembling. Why have you protected me? He stepped closer, his gaze so intense it felt like a physical touch. Because you are not like him, he said, his voice soft. There is something in you, Ilara, a connection to the land. I felt it the moment I touched you. It's weak, dormant, but it's there. It is the legacy of your bloodline, the magic of the kings and queens who came before you. He reached out and gently touched my cheek, his calloused fingers surprisingly soft against my skin. The now familiar jolt of energy arced between us, but this time it was different. It was a current of recognition, of shared essence. Valerius wanted you gone, not just because you are the true heir, but because he fears that power within you. He sold you to a beast, hoping to extinguish the last spark of Eldoria's magic. He didn't realize he was delivering it to the one person who could protect it. The revelation was overwhelming. I was not just a sold princess. I had a power I never knew existed, a birthright that my stepfather had tried to erase. And this man, this shifter, this ancient guardian, he had not bought me. He had rescued me. But as this new reality began to sink in, a terrifying thought surfaced. If Valerius had set a trap for Kale, he wouldn't just give up. He would come looking for me. He would send his soldiers. The quiet sanctuary of our cottage was about to become a battlefield, and I was standing in the very center of it. The knowledge of Kale's true nature and my own hidden power changed everything. The fear I held for him morphed into a complex mix of awe, respect, and a burgeoning affection that terrified me. The cottage no longer felt like a prison, but a sanctuary. Yet the peace was fragile, a delicate bubble I knew could burst at any moment. The revelation of my stepfather's true motives had not brought relief, only a heavier burden. My life was still not my own. It was a symbol, a key to a power struggle that spans generations. Kale began to train me, not just in survival, but in feeling my connection to the land. He would have me sit for hours by the river, teaching me to listen to the water's song. He taught me to place my hands on the ancient oaks and feel the slow, steady pulse of life within them. At first, I felt foolish, a city girl trying to commune with nature. But slowly, I began to feel it. A faint hum beneath the surface of things, a gentle energy that seemed to respond to my presence. It was like learning a new language, one spoken not with words, but with feelings, with the heart. My progress was slow, frustratingly so. "You think too much," Kyle would say, his voice laced with a rare hint of amusement. "You try to control it. You must let it control you. Let it flow through you." During these sessions, the physical distance between us dwindled. He would guide my hands, his touch sending shivers down my spine. He would stand behind me, his chest a warm, solid wall against my back, his deep voice murmuring instructions in my ear. The professional boundary of teacher and student was eroding, replaced by an intimacy that was both exhilarating and frightening. I was falling for him, falling for the beast who had saved me, the guardian who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. One afternoon, as we sat by a sun-dappled stream, I succeeded in making a small, unopened fern frond unfurl with just a thought. It was a tiny thing, but it was magic. My magic. I gasped, looking at Kyle with wide, disbelieving eyes. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face, transforming his rugged features into something breathtakingly handsome. It was the first time I had ever seen him truly smile. Without thinking, I threw my arms around his neck, my heart soaring with a joy so pure it felt like flying. He stiffened for a moment, surprised. Then his arms came around me, pulling me close. The embrace was different this time. It was not the hold of a captor or a protector. It was the embrace of a man holding a woman he cared for. He buried his face in my hair, his breath warm against my neck. "You did it, Ilara," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. That moment of triumph was shattered by the distant sound of a hunting horn. Kale stiffened, his body instantly going on high alert. He pulled away from me, his smile vanishing, replaced by a grim, feral look. "They're here," he growled. "Valerius has sent his hunters." Panic seized me. What do we do? He grabbed my hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "We fight." The attack came at dusk. Soldiers, clad in the regent's black and silver livery, swarmed into the clearing. They were led by Captain Vorlag, a notoriously cruel man known for his unwavering loyalty to my stepfather. They surrounded the cottage, their swords drawn, their faces set in grim lines. Kale shoved me behind him, shielding me with his body. "Stay inside," he commanded. "No matter what you hear, do not come out." He strode out of the cottage to face them, looking like a king from the old legends, proud and defiant. "You are trespassing on sacred ground." Kale's voice boomed, filled with an authority that made even the hardened soldiers hesitate. "Leave now, and your lives will be spared." Vorlag sneered. "We are here on the regent's authority to slay a monster and rescue the princess it holds captive. Surrender the girl, beast, and we may grant you a swift death." The moment the word beast left his lips, something in Kale snapped. A low, guttural snarl tore from his throat. His body began to contort, to shift. It was a horrifying, fascinating process. Bones cracked and reformed, muscles bunched and reshaped. In seconds, the man was gone, and in his place stood a massive wolf. He was larger than any wolf I had ever seen, his fur the color of midnight, his eyes burning with a terrifying golden light. The soldiers cried out in fear, some of them taking a step back, but Vorlag held his ground. "It is a monster! Slay it!" he roared. The soldiers charged. The wolf that was Kael met them with a blur of fur and fangs. He was a whirlwind of destruction, a force of nature unleashed. He moved with impossible speed and strength, tearing through the soldiers' ranks. I watched from the cottage window, my hand pressed to my mouth, my heart torn between terror and awe. This was his other half, the untamed, brutal power he kept leashed. It was magnificent and horrifying all at once. Suddenly, a soldier broke away from the main fight and charged towards the cottage. He must have seen me in the window. My blood ran cold. Before I could even scream, Kael was there. He leaped over the fray, intercepting the soldier and bringing him down with a savage grace. But the distraction cost him. While he was protecting me, Vorlag lunged, his sword plunging deep into Kael's shoulder. Kael roared in pain, a sound that ripped through me, and staggered back. The soldiers pressed their advantage, surrounding him, their swords and spears jabbing at him. He was injured, unnumbered. He was going to die. A new feeling surged through me, overpowering my fear, rage. A cold, clear rage at Valerius, at Vorlag, at these men who were trying to kill the one person who had shown me kindness, who had protected me. I felt that connection to the land, that humming energy rise up inside me. It was no longer a gentle stream, it was a raging river. I ran outside, screaming his name, "Kael!" Every head turned towards me. Vorlag's eyes widened in surprise, then a cruel smile spread across his face. "The princess," he said. "She is alive. It seems the beast was saving her for a special treat." He took a step towards me, his sword dripping with Kael's blood. "Don't worry, Your Highness. I'll save you from this monster." "He's not the monster!" I screamed, my voice shaking with fury. "You are! You and the traitor you serve!" Vorlag laughed. "Brave words. It seems the beast has brainwashed you. A pity." He lunged for me. But as he did, one of the soldiers, a young man with fear in his eyes, suddenly cried out, "Captain, look!" He was pointing at Kael. The great wolf was struggling to his feet, but it wasn't the wound that held the soldier's attention. It was me. I was standing between Kael and his attackers, my hands outstretched, and a faint, silvery light was emanating from my palms. The plants around my feet began to grow at an alarming rate, vines and thorny brambles snaking out, wrapping around the soldiers' legs, tripping them, holding them fast. They cried out in shock and confusion, hacking at the plants with their swords. Vorlag stared at me, his face a mixture of disbelief and fear. "Witchcraft," he whispered. But as my focus was on the soldiers, another man, one I hadn't noticed before, stepped out from behind a tree. It was Fenris, one of Valerius's most trusted spies. He ignored the chaos, his eyes fixed on me. "Princess," he said, his voice deceptively calm, "the regent was right to be concerned about you, but don't believe the beast's lies. It was he who orchestrated your father's death. He is a kingslayer, a monster who has coveted Eldora's throne for years. He didn't rescue you, he kidnapped you to finish what he started." The words hit me like a physical blow. Kingslayer! He killed my father? I looked at Kael, who was now shifting back into his human form, clutching his bleeding shoulder, his face pale with pain and exhaustion. His golden eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of desperation in them. "Elara, don't listen to him," he rasped. Fenris's words, laced with poison and doubt, seeped into my mind. I remembered the stories I'd heard as a child, whispers of a great beast that roamed the woods, a shadow that had fallen over the kingdom around the time of my father's hunting accident. Could it be true? Had I placed my trust, my heart, in the hands of my father's murderer? The light from my hands flickered and died. The vines loosened their grip. My trust, so new and fragile, fractured. The battle raged around me, but I was frozen, trapped in a new, more terrible war within my own heart. The spy, Fenris, saw the doubt in my eyes and pressed his advantage. He has filled your head with lies about your stepfather, the regent, who has worked tirelessly to hold this kingdom together since the tragedy. Kale is the poison princess. He is the ancient curse this kingdom must be rid of. My mind was a maelstrom. I looked at Kale, kneeling on the ground, bleeding, his golden eyes pleading with me. Then I looked at the soldiers, at Fenris' sincere, concerned face. Everything was a lie. But which version? The world spun around me, the sounds of battle fading into a dull roar. Captain Vorlog, freed from the vines, saw his opportunity. "She's confused. Take the beast, now!" The soldiers surged forward, their purpose renewed. Kale tried to stand, to fight, but the wound in his shoulder was too severe. He was weakening fast. Something inside me broke. Fenris's words were plausible. They fed into the fears that had been whispered in the castle halls for years. But my heart, my very soul, screamed a different truth. I thought of Kale's gentleness with the wounded bird, the profound sadness in his eyes, the way he spoke of the land with such love and reverence. I thought of the energy that flowed between us, a connection that felt more real and true than anything I had ever known. A murderer could not possess such a spirit. A monster could not be the source of such life. "No," I whispered, the word a fragile breath. Then, louder, my voice ringing with a conviction I didn't know I possessed. "No!" I ran to Kale's side, placing myself between him and the advancing soldiers. I knelt and placed my hands on his wounded shoulder. The silvery light flowed from my palms again, brighter this time, warmer. It poured into his wound, and I felt a deep, resonant hum as his flesh began to knit together under my touch. Kale gasped, his eyes widening in astonishment. He felt it too, my power, awakened by my choice, by my faith in him. "You are the liar," I said, my gaze finding Fenris in the crowd. "My stepfather is the traitor, and you are his mouthpiece." Kale, his strength returning, slowly got to his feet. He stood beside me, no longer just a man, but a force of nature, his wound completely healed. "She is right," he said, his voice resonating with ancient power. "And now you will pay for your treachery." He looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. I nodded, a silent answer. We were in this together. He needed to show me the final proof, the evidence that would quell the last dregs of doubt sown by Fenris's words. "I need to show you something, Ilara," he said, his voice low and urgent, meant only for me. "The truth about your father." Ignoring the soldiers for a moment, he led me into the cottage. He pulled up a loose floorboard beneath his bed, revealing a hidden compartment. From it, he retrieved a small, iron-bound chest. He opened it, and my breath caught in my throat. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was my father's royal signet ring and a stack of letters. "I couldn't save him," Kale said, his voice thick with a grief that was still raw. "I tried. Valerius poisoned him slowly, a rare toxin from the shadowfen that mimics a wasting sickness. I am immune to most poisons, but I couldn't brew an antidote without the key ingredients, which Valerius had ordered destroyed. I found your father in the woods on the day he died. He wasn't hunting. He was trying to escape, to get to me. He knew Valerius was killing him." Kale pushed the letters towards me. "He wrote these in his final weeks. He gave them to me, along with his ring, and made me swear an oath to protect you, to protect the kingdom, and to restore the balance. I picked up the top letter, my hands trembling. The handwriting was my father's, elegant and precise, though it grew weaker with each page. He wrote of his love for me, his fears for the kingdom, and the full extent of Valerius's betrayal. He detailed the pact with the Lycae and begged Kael to find me, to awaken my power, and to help me reclaim my birthright. The tears I shed were not of grief for a father long gone, but of rage for a father who had been stolen from me. The last vestiges of doubt were burned away, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. I looked up at Kael, my heart overflowing with a maelstrom of emotions, gratitude, sorrow for his own losses, and a love so fierce it was a physical pain in my chest. "He trusted you," I whispered. "With my life," Kael replied, his golden eyes shining with unshed tears. "And I will not fail him. I will not fail you." We stood there for a moment, united in our grief and our purpose. The bond between us was no longer just a spark of energy. It was an unbreakable chain forged in truth and sacrifice. We were no longer master and servant, or even protector and protected. We were partners. He reached out and cupped my face, his thumb gently wiping away a tear. "We end this now, Ilara, together." I nodded, my resolve hardening into steel. We walked out of the cottage, hand in hand, to face our enemies. The soldiers, who had been hesitating, unsure of what to do, stared at us. Captain Vorlog and Fenris looked uneasy. They had expected to find a monster and a terrified victim. They were not prepared for a queen and her guardian, standing united and radiating a power that was both ancient and new. "Captain Vorlog," I called out, my voice clear and commanding, imbued with the authority of my bloodline. "You serve a traitor and a murderer. Your regent, my stepfather, killed my father, King Theron." I held up the signet ring. This was my father's. He gave it to Kael, the true guardian of this kingdom, on the day he died. A murmur went through the ranks of the soldiers. They were sworn to the crown, not to the regent. To them, the king's ring was a sacred symbol. "Fenris," I continued, my eyes locking on the spy, "your lies are as empty as your master's honor. The witchcraft you fear is the lifeblood of Eldoria, the very magic my family is sworn to protect." Kael stepped forward, his presence immense. He did not shift, but the predatory power of the wolf was plain to see in his eyes, in the coiled tension of his body. "Your regent has broken the ancient pact," he boomed. "He has weakened the land and its people. He is a cancer on this kingdom. You can stand with him and die as traitors, or you can stand with your true queen and fight for the soul of Eldoria." He offered them a choice. Some of the soldiers, their faces etched with fear and confusion, looked to Vorlog. The captain, however, was a zealot. "Lies! Tricks! Kill them both!" he shrieked, his face contorted in a mask of fury. He charged at me, but he never reached me. Kael moved in a blur, his hand catching Vorlog's sword arm. With a sickening crack, he broke it. Vorlog screamed and fell to his knees. Fenris, the spy, tried to slip away into the trees, but a thick wall of thorns erupted from the ground, blocking his path. The remaining soldiers looked at the thorns, at their defeated captain, and then at me, holding my father's ring, and Kael, the embodiment of primal power. One by one, they dropped their swords and knelt. They chose their queen. The journey back to the capital was swift. We were accompanied by the regent's own soldiers, now my loyal followers. We arrived as Valerius was hosting a grand ball, a decadent affair, to celebrate a new trade deal that, I now knew, would sell off the last of our kingdom's ancient forests. We entered the throne room not as prisoners, but as avengers. The music screeched to a halt. The courtiers gasped, their painted faces a mixture of shock and fear. Valerius stood on the dais, a goblet of wine in his hand. His face, usually a mask of smug control, turned pale when he saw me, alive and well, with Kael at my side and his own captain kneeling before me. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, his voice trying for authority but laced with panic. "Seize the beast and arrest the princess! She is clearly his thrall!" "The only beast in this room is you, Valerius," I said, my voice ringing through the silent hall. I walked forward, holding up my father's ring. "You are a usurper and a kingslayer. You murdered my father, King Theron." I threw the packet of letters at his feet. "His own words condemn you." Valerius stared at the letters, his composure finally cracking. He lunged for a decorative sword on the wall, his eyes wild with desperation. "She's lying! She's a witch!" The royal guard, sworn to protect the throne, hesitated, looking from Valerius to me. It was the moment of truth. Kael moved to intercept Valerius, but I put a hand on his arm. "No, this is my fight." I stood my ground as Valerius charged at me, his face a mask of hate. I did not summon thorns or vines. I simply reached out with my mind, connecting not to the potted plants in the sterile ballroom, but to the very stones of the castle, to the deep foundational magic of my ancestors. The air grew heavy, thick with power. A silvery light, the color of moonlight on water, enveloped me. Valerius stopped in his tracks, his sword falling from his nerveless fingers. He stared at me, at the raw, untamed magic I now commanded, and he knew he was defeated. His power was built on lies and gold. Mine was born of the very soul of the kingdom. The royal guard, seeing this undeniable display of royal magic, dropped to their knees, their allegiance clear. "Seize him," I commanded, my voice quiet but absolute. The guards swarmed the dais and dragged the weeping, pathetic man away. The throne was mine. I turned to Kael. The whole court was watching us. He stood in the shadows, ever the guardian, ready to act. But I would not have him in the shadows. I walked to him and took his hand, pulling him to the center of the room, into the light. "This is Kael," I announced to the stunned court. "He is not a monster. He is the last of the Lycae, the sworn protectors of Eldoria. He saved my life, and he has saved this kingdom from the rot of treason. He is my guardian, my partner, and my heart." I stood on my toes and kissed him, a public declaration of my choice, my claim. He was mine, and I was his. The court gasped, but in that kiss, they saw not just a princess and a shifter, but the mending of a bond that had been broken for too long. They saw the return of their magic, the restoration of their kingdom, and the dawn of a new age. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of change. Valerius was tried for his crimes, and with the evidence of my father's letters and the testimony of the soldiers, he was found guilty of treason and regicide. The kingdom, learning the truth of his corrupt reign, breathed a collective sigh of relief. My coronation was a simple ceremony, not of lavish excess, but of solemn purpose. I stood before my people not as a sheltered princess, but as a queen who had walked through darkness and emerged stronger. Kael stood beside me, in his human form, a quiet, powerful presence that gave me strength. The people were wary of him at first, their minds filled with years of superstitious fear. But they saw the respect and love in my eyes, and they saw his unwavering devotion to me and to the kingdom. Slowly, they began to accept him, not as a beast to be feared, but as the guardian to be honored. Rebuilding the kingdom was a monumental task. Valerius's greed had left deep scars. The treasury was empty, the people were overtaxed and demoralized, and the land itself was weary. But with Kael's guidance, I began to heal the wounds. We reinstated the old pacts, honoring the spirits of the forest and river. I used my growing power not as a weapon, but as a tool for restoration. I walked the barren fields and coaxed life back into the soil. I helped the rivers run clean again. And as the land healed, so did the people. Hope, a long-absent visitor, returned to Eldoria. Kael and I ruled as partners. I was the voice and heart of the people. He was the silent strength and ancient wisdom of the land. We were two halves of a whole, our bond the foundation upon which the new Eldoria was built. He taught me the ways of his people, the deep spiritual connection to the natural world. I, in turn, taught him how to navigate the complexities of the human heart, how to trust again, how to love without reservation. His loneliness, the profound sorrow that had clung to him for so long, began to recede, replaced by a quiet contentment I had never thought I'd see in him. Our home was the castle, but his heart remained in the forest. Many nights he would transform, not into the terrifying battle wolf, but into the great silver-furred Lycae of the legends. I would go with him, riding on his back as he ran through the moonlit woods. It was in these moments, with the wind in my hair and the powerful rhythm of his stride beneath me, that I felt most alive, most free. We were a queen and her guardian, a woman and her wolf. Our love story, a new legend whispered on the wind. One evening, we stood on the highest balcony of the castle, overlooking the capital. The city lights twinkled below, a stark contrast to the vast, dark expanse of the whispering woods that bordered it. The kingdom was peaceful, thriving under our joint rule. Kael stood behind me, his arms wrapped around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder. He was in his human form, solid and warm against my back. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple. "It's beautiful," I whispered, leaning back against him. "It's healing." "It is because of you," he rumbled, his voice a soft vibration against my ear. "You brought the magic back, Ilara. You are the heart of Eldoria." I turned in his arms to face him, placing my hand on his chest. I could feel the steady, strong beat of his heart beneath my palm, the heart of a man and a wolf, a heart that had been broken and alone, but had learned to beat in time with mine. "We did it together," I said, looking up into his luminous golden eyes. "We are its heart." He smiled, that rare, breathtaking smile that was reserved only for me, and lowered his head to kiss me. As our lips met, a faint, silvery light shimmered from my skin, mingling with the ancient, golden power that always seemed to hum just beneath his. The moon rose over the horizon, bathing us in its gentle glow. We were whole. The pact was restored, and the kingdom was safe, protected by its queen and its guardian, forever bound by a love that had been forged in darkness and reborn in the light.